The National College Athletic Association, is also known as the NCAA, it's an association of over 1,200 institutions and organizations that organize athletic events across the United States and Canada. And because of this, they have many policies, and many of these policies regard student athletes. And these policies that regard them, many of them are they put negative effects on the athletes, and that for three reasons. One, the NCAA's financial policies negatively affect financial improvement of athletes. Two, the policies regulate the players' media involvement. And three, the NCAA's drug and substance policies negatively affect student athletes and invades their personal lives. The NCAA's financial policies negatively affect their financial improvement because in the NCAA, players are not allowed to have a salary. So this means they get no revenue from participating, and only 2% of high school athletes eventually get a scholarship. So that leaves 98% of college athletes without time for a job. And according to the College Board, these are stats on the prices for four-year universities. It's approximately $7,000 for in-state tuition and $18,000 for out-of-state, and it's harmful to lower class student athletes because they won't have time for a job because of all the time involved in athletics. And although the NCAA does limit training time to 20 hours a week, it's simply not the case. For example, according to a survey conducted by the NCAA, football players spend on average 43 hours on training a week and 38 hours in academics. And similar with basketball, with women's basketball, they spend about 37.5 hours on training a week. This allows time for obtaining an income through other means such as a job. These policies are unjust because the athletes work the hardest and they don't get money for their hard work. According to the budget released by the NCAA for 2011 to 2012, they earned $871.6 million, and 0% of this went to the thousands of players who play in the NCAA. On top of that, many coaches earn millions of dollars, and according to USA Today, Mac Brown, the head of the University of Texas football team, earned over $5 million in 2011 alone. And the top 15 paid coaches received $53 million for 1 year. In addition, CBS Sports surveyed approximately 100 college coaches about the status of college athletes, and 58% of these coaches were in favor of student athletes being paid for what they're doing. This shows back and support by important figures. And punishments are harsh, if players are paid, and pay is not limited to just money. For example, as reported by Rachel George of USA Today, University of North Carolina was sanctioned partly for student athletes accepting $27,000 in improper benefits. Because of this, the NCAA banned the university from the 2012 bowl. They lost 15 scholarships, and they were on 3 years of probation. These student athletes should be paid because they are the deciding factors of the NCAA's paycheck. The NCAA puts personal profit at the expense of players. For example, coaches' salaries are dependent on the student athletes, and school exposure are dependent on the student athlete, as well as the NCAA. However, these athletes receive nothing for their work in the sports. Second, the NCAA policies regulate the athletes' media involvement. It's very controlling of the athletes. Players cannot endorse products of any kind during the season, and players cannot appear on radio or television programs if they're paid. If these rules are broken, players are set with a punishment. The third reason is that the NCAA's drug policy negatively affects student athletes. Now, the drugs I'm talking about are not performance-enhancing drugs, but rather recreational drugs, including marijuana, and these are not just limited to drugs. Excessive amounts of caffeine are not allowed for student athletes, And quite comically, there are 6 vitamin water flavors which athletes cannot drink. Punishments are put forth, and students caught with drugs in the system face a mandatory 1-year suspension. And in 2009, the NCAA released a survey that indicated that 22.6% of student athletes admitted to marijuana use within the past year, and that was an increase from 2005, 1.4% increase. In addition, after the elections in 2012 in Colorado and Washington, which legalized recreational marijuana use in those states for people 21 and over, the NCAA released a statement that stated the legalizing of marijuana in Colorado and Washington does not impact the NCAA drug testing rules. This is another example of invasion of personal life and privacy. So, in conclusion, the NCAA has many policies that negatively affect student athletes because, 1, their financial policies negatively affect them. 2, the policies regulate the players' media involvement. And 3, the NCAA's drug and substance policies negatively affect student athletes.
All right, at the beginning I know what the topic is, but I don't know exactly what the claim is. The secondary claims, though, are spelled out pretty effectively. And at the end of the speech, you do come back and have a more effective statement of the proposition, but it needs to be, you're kind of making it in a passive way, and I think you need to be much more assertive about what the proposition is going to be. The nature of the controversy is a little unclear to me. I do think you need to talk about what the harm is to any of these athletes. The notion that their privacy is being invaded, that's a value claim. I think that you need to be talking about that there's something that's illegitimate about the way the money is being spent. I think that's also bordering on a value argument rather than on the factual issue. Now, if for example, the careers or the academic ability of the athletes suffers in some way, I think that would be an example of something that's a factual claim. At one point you had a piece of information that said that the rules are not being followed, especially I think on the training hours, that's what it was. Well, then it sounds to me like the source of the problem here is not what the NCAA rules are, but the lack of adhering to those particular rules that is creating the problem for the athletes in that situation. So that one seems to run a little contrary to the position that you're taking. Later on, you have an argument about the vitamin water and how some of those are excluded. I assume there's probably some issue related to performance enhancing contents in that, whether it's caffeine or some other stimulant that people are using, as opposed, which seems to be substantially different from the marijuana argument. Those two things are being conflated here, and I think that creates a little bit of obscurity into the way the argument is actually developing. I liked a couple of the examples that you had about spending. One of the things that you mentioned was what the revenues were to the colleges. One of the things that I didn't hear was what the expenditures are by the colleges for athletic programs to begin with. And so you mentioned like some figures in the $800 million range that they are spending, or excuse me, that they're bringing in. I'm not quite sure who's covered by all of these things, which athletes are affected by this, which ones are not. The idea that athletes are going to get paid for their performance, for instance, assumes that there is money to pay them, and I didn't hear any argument that suggested that that was something that was going to be a possibility. There is a lot of times when you're dancing on the edge of policy claims on this. I like the some of the information that you had, that people feel like there are some things that would be resolved by paying the athletes. I thought there was an interesting survey there. We do need a source citation on that. You could use a little bit more data there. There's a little bit too much reading in the presentation, but I think you explained the argument well at the end, and you have a nice summary that kind of leaves us with a good feel for what your argument was. All right, thank you.